Hey there, 80s family. Welcome back to the Nostalgia Vault. You know that specific feeling? When the Christmas tree is starting to drop a few needles, the fridge is stuffed with tin foil-covered leftovers, and there's that electric hum in the air, because the calendar is about to flip. New Year's Eve in the 1980s wasn't just a date change, it was a full sensory experience. It was the smell of hairspray and cheap cologne, the scratchy sequins on a party dress, and the fuzzy static on a giant floor model TV. Before we could text a Happy New Year emoji or stream a countdown on our phones, we had to earn our celebration. We had to be physically present, fully engaged, and ready to party like it was, well, 1999. Today, we're hopping into the DeLorean and heading back to the neon-soaked, high-energy, heartwarming New Year's Eves of our youth. Grab a glass of sparkling cider, settle into your favorite spot on the couch, and let's remember why the 80s did New Year's like nobody else. The epic VHS rental run. Before Netflix or any streaming service existed, the ultimate New Year's Eve ritual started at the local video store. Whether it was Blockbuster or a small mom-and-pop shop with wood-paneled walls, the video store was the place to be on December 31st. The stakes were incredibly high. If you arrived after 4 p.m., all the new releases like Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, or Top Gun would already be gone, leaving you with nothing but empty plastic cases and Be Kind, Please Rewind stickers. There was a specific comforting smell to those stores, a mix of industrial carpet cleaner and the faint aroma of buttery popcorn. You'd spend what felt like hours walking the aisles, flipping over heavy clamshell cases, and debating intensely with your siblings until you found the perfect movie marathon. That physical hunt, actually holding the tape in your hand, made the movie night feel like a prestigious event. You'd head home, huddle around the VCR, adjust the tracking on the remote until the static lines disappeared, and settle in for a night of cinematic magic. The neighborhood house party. In the 80s, you didn't need to pay a cover charge at an expensive club to have the time of your life.
Careful with that camera.
The best nightclub was usually right down the street in a neighbor's basement. New Year's Eve was the absolute peak of the neighborhood house party culture. You'd walk into a living room transformed by crepe paper streamers, balloons taped to the ceiling, and large bowls of neon-colored punch. The air was thick with the scent of Aquanet hairspray and the faint smell of tobacco. There was no scrolling through a phone to avoid awkward social moments. You actually had to look people in the eye and talk. Adults would be dressed in their Sunday best, but with a festive 80s twist. Think velvet blazers, ruffled shirts, and dresses with massive shoulder pads. The music came from a stack of vinyl records or a dual cassette deck playing a mixtape someone spent 3 hours recording from the radio. These parties weren't about likes or shares. They were about the community, the laughter, and the feeling of safety in a room full of people who actually knew your name. The decadent party menu. If you didn't see a giant cheese log covered in crushed pecans, was it even a New Year's Eve party? The 80s was the undisputed golden age of the fancy appetizer. We're talking about Swedish meatballs kept warm in a crock pot, shrimp cocktails served in chilled glass bowls, and those iconic little rye bread pizzas topped with sausage and melted cheese. And let's not forget the Jell-O molds. Shimmering, neon-colored towers filled with fruit, marshmallows, or sometimes things that definitely should not have been in Jell-O. For the kids, New Year's meant the good soda. Maybe a 2-liter bottle of 7-Up or some sparkling grape juice served in plastic champagne flutes so we could feel like sophisticated adults for a night. Everything was savory, salty, and served on festive paper plates. Every bite tasted like a special occasion, and the kitchen was always the heart of the party, filled with the sounds of ice clinking and neighbors sharing recipes. Sequins, spandex, and power suits. Fashion on New Year's Eve was a high-stakes game of who can shine the brightest. This was the one night of the year when you could wear as much glitter and neon as you wanted without anyone batting an eye.
I told you the punch was strong.
Women broke out the heavy-duty sequins that would catch the light every time they moved,
I think I'm wearing it
accompanied
now.
by hair that had been teased to the heavens. Shoulder pads were non-negotiable, giving everyone a powerful silhouette. Men weren't left out of the fun either. Skinny ties, silk shirts, and perhaps a white tuxedo jacket if they were feeling particularly bold. Even the kids were dressed up in velvet dresses or clip-on ties that were always a little bit too tight. There was an incredible amount of effort put into getting ready that took hours. You'd spend half the evening in front of a bathroom mirror with a curling iron and a tub of blue styling gel. Those styles might seem loud today, but that boldness perfectly reflected the optimism of the decade. We weren't just welcoming a new year, we were dressing up for a future that felt as bright as a neon sign. The magic of the Polaroid moment. In a world long before digital cameras and cloud storage, the Polaroid camera was the undisputed king of the New Year's party. It was the only way to get that wonderful sense of instant gratification. You'd hear that iconic whir-clack sound, and a square piece of white film would slide out of the front. Then came the mandatory ritual. You'd wave the photo in the air, even though the instructions told you not to. And watch as the blurry gray image slowly, magically morphed into a memory right before your eyes. Those photos were raw, honest, and often hilariously imperfect. There was no delete and retake. If Aunt Linda had her eyes closed, that was the photo you kept. This made every shot feel incredibly precious and unique. You'd pass the damp photo around the room, everyone marveling at the colors as they developed. By the time the clock struck midnight, the refrigerator would be covered in these tiny, physical squares of joy. They were tangible evidence that you were there, you were happy, and you were with the people you loved. The landline long-distance battle. At precisely 12:05 a.m. on January 1st, a great American tradition began. The frantic struggle to get a line. Long-distance calls were a luxury in the 80s, but on New Year's Eve, the rules went out the window. You'd stand in the kitchen or the hallway, stretching the tangled 20-foot phone cord as far as it would go, dialing and redialing your grandma in Florida or your cousins in another state. Most of the time, you'd just get a busy signal because the entire nation's phone grid was overwhelmed. But when the call finally clicked through, when you finally heard that crackly, distant, Happy New Year, it felt like a massive triumph. You'd pass the heavy plastic receiver around the family, each person getting 30 seconds to shout their love into the mouthpiece. We didn't have the luxury of FaceTime or Zoom, but hearing a loved one's voice through the static made the world feel much smaller and warmer for those few precious minutes. The no-rules sleepover. For an 80s kid, New Year's Eve was the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card when it came to bedtime. It was the one night of the year when the usual rules were suspended, and you were allowed to stay awake until the adults went to bed. We would transform the family room into a fortress of sleeping bags, mismatched pillows, and piles of comic books. While the parents were in the other room laughing, we were in our own secret world, fueled by an endless supply of soda and potato chips. We'd try to act tough and stay awake for the entire night, but by 11:30 p.m., half of our army was usually fast asleep on the carpet. For those of us who managed to stay awake until the clock flipped, seeing the numbers change felt like witnessing a miracle. Those nights, lit only by the soft glow of the TV and the fading lights of the Christmas tree, provided a sense of childhood freedom and magic that stayed with us forever. The MTV New Year's Eve Rock and Roll Ball. If you were a teenager or a young adult in the 80s, you weren't watching the traditional news networks. You were glued to MTV. The New Year's Eve Rock and Roll Ball was where the real party was happening. You'd see the original VJs like Martha Quinn or Alan Hunter hosting a wild, neon-drenched concert featuring the biggest bands of the era. Duran Duran, Hall & Oates, or The Cars. It felt rebellious, edgy, and incredibly modern. The music videos were cinematic masterpieces, and the energy coming through the screen was infectious. You'd sit on the floor, inches away from the TV, ready to hit record on your VCR to capture your favorite performances. MTV made you feel like you were part of the cool crowd in New York City, even if you were just sitting in your pajamas in a quiet suburb. It was the soundtrack of our youth, playing at full volume until the final countdown began. The aerobics resolution boom. As soon as the clock struck midnight and the last of the champagne was finished, resolution fever would sweep the nation. In the 80s, that meant one thing: aerobics. The first week of January was dominated by the New Year, New You movement, fueled by the massive success of Jane Fonda's workout tapes. Suddenly, every department store was sold out of neon spandex leotards, leg warmers, and sweatbands. There was a genuine high-energy belief that you could transform yourself into a fitness icon just by popping a VHS tape into the player and following along in your living room. The let's get physical spirit was everywhere, and it was unapologetically loud and colorful. Neighbors would talk about their new gym memberships or the Soloflex machine they just ordered. While many of those leg warmers were destined to be forgotten in the back of the closet, that initial burst of January optimism was a quintessentially 80s way to kick off the year. New Year's Day, the bowl game fog. January 1st had a very specific, sleepy rhythm in the 80s. You'd wake up to a quiet house, the faint smell of yesterday's party still in the air, and a mountain of party favors waiting to be cleared. The day was dedicated to the big three of New Year's traditions: the Rose Parade, college bowl games, and a seemingly endless supply of leftovers. You'd spend the entire afternoon in a state of festive exhaustion on the couch. The sound of marching bands on the TV and the roar of stadium crowds provided the comforting white noise for a day of total relaxation. Dads would be yelling at the screen while moms finally started the big post-holiday cleanup. It was a day of transition, the very last legal day of the holiday season, before the reality of school and work returned on January 2nd. There was something incredibly peaceful about that shared national laziness, a collective deep breath we all took together before the engine of the new year started roaring to life. Looking back, New Year's in the 80s was special because it wasn't about the spectacle we showed to a digital audience. It was about the spirit we shared in the room. We didn't have followers to impress. We just had friends to hug and family to call. We worked for our memories, waiting for the Polaroid to develop, hunting for the right movie at the video store, and fighting for a clear phone line to say, "I love you." And maybe that's why those memories stick with us so vividly even decades later. What about you? What was your must-have 80s New Year's tradition?
Do you think it's tall enough?
Did you have a favorite movie you always rented, or a specific outfit that you still secretly wish you could pull off today? Drop a comment below and let's keep the nostalgia alive. I'd love to hear your stories of sequins, static, and those legendary midnight toasts. This is Lisa from the Nostalgia Vault, reminding you that the best way to start a new year is to be fully present for every second of it. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to join our growing 80s family. I'll catch you in the next one, right after I finish rewinding this tape. Happy New Year, everyone!